To the general speedrunning audience, games with glitzy glitches and spectacular skips are the most popular. It's not hard to see why. They are visually impressive. Not every game is held together with scotch tape and paper clips though. Sometimes a developer learns how to improve their game from sequel to sequel. Sometimes games get released with nary a glitch in sight. This brings us to Donkey Kong Country 3. In a vacuum, the third installment in the SNES trilogy is a great game, held up to any other standard, and that might be the way people remember it. But this is the sequel to one of the greatest games of its generation. Donkey Kong Country 2 shines so bright, it casts a shadow on the other two installments in the series. How do you thrive when you're living in the shadow of your older brother? You follow your own path. Welcome to Speed Docs. Donkey Kong Country 3 released in late 1996, only 1 year after its predecessor, as well as only a few months after the newest console, the Nintendo 64. The developers at Rare squeezed out one last entry to the series before moving on to the world of 3D. In it, Dixie Kong returns from the previous game, accompanied by her cousin, Kiddy Kong. In this adventure, the two are off to save Donkey and Diddy, who have gone missing in the Northern Hemisphere. DKC 3 brings back the side-scrolling platformer action that fans have come to expect. These apes are climbing cliffs, swimming through reefs, and hopping on bad guys all over town. The duo will travel to 7 different regions with the help of Funky Kong's custom vehicles. As for the game's 2 playable characters, Dixie is relatively unchanged from the previous game. She can still spin roll through enemies and slow her fall with her helicopter hair move. Kiddy replaces Diddy from DKC 2, but plays a little differently. He can keep up with Dixie's speed, but his ability is he can bounce off of the surface of the water if players time their jumps right. His size also affects team throws, as he is much heavier than his cousin. With that out of the way, let's roll right in. Back in the early 2000s, speedrunning was viewed as a challenge, like beating a game without taking damage or getting any upgrades. For the community that sprung up around speedruns, difficulty, expertise, and spectacle were paramount. For games that allowed it, most runners opted for the hardest difficulty the game had to offer. For Donkey Kong Country 3, this was no different. When players found out that DKC 3 had game codes to make the run harder, you better believe this became the standard way to play. Here's how it works. In the File Select menu, players can enter a master code to unlock a cheat menu using LRR, LRR, LR, LR. Players could then enter a 5-letter cheat code to be applied to the file. While the game has cheats for added lives, changing the character's outfits, or autosaving after every level, the cheats used by speedrunners were harder and toughest. Normally, a completed file without cheats maxes out at 103%. With the harder cheat, 29 of the game's DK barrels will be replaced with banana bunches, making the full completion 104%. That removes 1 barrel from most stages. Finally, with the toughest cheat activated, all checkpoint barrels are removed, and all but 4 DK barrels are removed from the game. Instead, players start every level with both Kongs. Completing the game with toughest activated brings up the completion total to 105%, the ultimate challenge. This became the standard. Not satisfied with just playing the game quickly, the earliest runners were obsessed with running the game in its hardest form. One of the first recorded speedruns of DKC3 comes from the prominent David Marshmallow Gibbons. Marsh made a name for himself doing good quality speedruns of every game he owned, which was a pretty diverse library. Among his many submissions, one of them was DKC3. Marsh submitted a 105% hard mode run back on June 8th of 2004, completed in 1 hour and 51 minutes. Another hallmark of older speedruns is the use of in-game time, or IGT. If the game can keep track of how long the playthrough was, runners could quickly and easily compare their attempts to anyone else's. The main problem is, the IGT for this game is a little weird to calculate. But as long as everyone is on the same system, it's close enough. Marsh only ran the 105% category back in 2004, but others were at least attempting any percent runs around this time. Something to note, however, DKC3 was notably less popular than its predecessor. The thread for DKC2 was actively looking for strategies and time saves, while DKC3 threads were gauging interest to see if anyone even wanted to watch a run. It would be a while before anyone went ahead and recorded another run to show off. 5 years later, Austin Davis Hallman would come in to sweep both the any percent single segment and the 105% times with a 51-minute IGT and a 1 hour 36-minute IGT respectively. His submissions were a bit dubious, as the verifiers found several problems with the run. Davis would come back a year later to improve both times by about 6 minutes each. In his new any percent run, Davis breezes through the first 2 worlds, Lake Orangatanga and Cremwood Forest. The developers put in invisible warp barrels that let players skip each level in these first 2 worlds fairly quickly. This was probably to reward players in the know and let them skip to the later part of the game faster on subsequent playthroughs. Regardless, Davis uses these warp barrels to beat Belcha and Eric in under 7 minutes. Next up, we see the worlds Mechanos, Cotton Top Cove, and K3. Each of these worlds goes pretty smoothly and takes roughly 9 minutes each to clear. On World 6, Razor Ridge, the stages go really well, but the boss fight with Barbos is a little sloppy. It's time to head to the final world, Chaos Core. These levels are some of the hardest in the game, and Davis stumbles a little bit on a few of them. Notably, his lightning lookout is a little slow as he waits around for the buzzer cycles. In Castle Chaos, Davis fights the Chaos boss from the Mechanos world, followed by Scientist K. Rool. All in all, Davis's time was a 52:58 RTA, or 45 minutes IGT. The run itself was pretty straightforward. There were no deaths and no major mistakes. Compared to his first submission, the 51 IGT, Davis had improved his movement and was rolling more often. Reading the feedback from his first run, seems like Davis put in a lot of effort to clean up his gameplay. The community was really pleased with the new submission. Davis was making a good effort to improve the run, but, fun fact, this was not the only improvement to the time. Because at the same time that Davis was doing these runs, there was a different group who were also running DKC3. On the other side of the world, interest in DKC speedruns was picking up in Japan. Just like on SDA, DKC2 was by far the most popular among the original trilogy. Because the gameplay is very similar between games though, runners of one game could make the jump between any game in the series with relative ease. Among those early Japanese players were Hodorubi, Fils, and Kazunoko. While the SDA community used the in-game timer, the Japanese community, more frequently referred to as the J community, focused on real-time or RTA. The J community historically started their timer on console power on. Nowadays, most speedrunners start from file select or some specific starting point instead. J-timing is essentially 10 seconds longer than the modern file select timing. For the sake of simplicity, we will be converting all runs to modern timing in this video. Back in November of 2008, Hodoruby got a 101.08, and in May 2009, Feast got a 57.37. Unfortunately, while these runs were probably streamed on Nico Video, the early community did not save a lot of their speedruns. A good number of videos from this era have been lost to time, witnessed, but not archived. We do have a run from Feast a year later in January of 2010 though, a time of 56.40. Feast would jump back and forth between normal runs and hard mode runs, but Hodoruby was solely focused on going fast. Hodoruby comes back with a 51.59 time, saving almost 4 minutes over Feast's run from just a few months earlier. Hodoruby's change was indicative of a larger change in speedrunning at the time. Moving into the 2010s, the culture around speedrunning was evolving. As more people began running these games, the focus on difficulty and spectacle took a back seat as competition moved to center stage. While it was difficult to play on hard mode back in the day, these runners were now so good that the removal of checkpoints and extra health wasn't much of an issue anymore. The real hard part of the run became playing optimally and going fast. As we mentioned earlier, DKC3 is not the most popular of the 3 games in the trilogy. This is reflected by both casual players and speedrunners alike. This meant that most people were not focusing their efforts on running the game, preferring instead to run either of the other 2 games. Runners came and went, viewing DKC3 as a layover rather than a destination. In 2011, a year after Hodoruby's 51.18, someone decided to make DKC3 their priority, Kazunoko. After dedicating an entire year to running the game, Kazunoko was rewarded with a final time of 49.59. There were no major changes to the round. No big tricks were discovered. With no other high-level runs or runners to work off of, Kazunoko had to rely on optimizing his own gameplay to save little bits of time in lots of different places. All of the easy mistakes were being cleaned up. The game was getting to a place where it wouldn't be easy to push the record much further. Bringing an expert opinion, Donkey Kong Country 2 legend Riz would start playing DKC3. Being skilled in the second game, he was able to transfer that skill and pick up the third game quickly. In no time at all, Riz got a 49.46, the first sub-50 run in J-timing. By now, the winds of change were blowing again. Players were forming small communities around their favorite games and garnering new members all the time. This period would allow for special interests to form. With more eyes than ever before looking to speedrunning as a hobby, DKC3 was ripe for the picking. By 2012, the website Speedruns Live was a staple in speedrunning culture. Before streaming sites became the norm, SRL connected runners and allowed players to race others in whatever game they chose. On SRL, newcomer Morks made his way into the community. While most runners were enamored with the second game in the series, Morks was in love with DKC3.
I was going back then on the website called Speedruns Live, and there was these MRC channels where I've seen those people, running different games and whatnot, and there was one for Donkey Kong Country 3. But there was not a lot of people running it specifically back then. A lot of more people were tended to go for the second one or the first one. But there was this guy actually, giving me advice and telling me to take the game forward, I guess. This guy is called The Juice. This guy is like one of the oldies. I'm really glad that he took me seriously because back then DKC3 wasn't much of a loved speed game, to be fair. And this guy was one of the only ones that said, no, go for it. You should definitely improve. And then I think that what got me serious in it is when I was able to secure the first plate on the Speedrun Live's leaderboard.
With the help of The Juice, Morks had all he needed to focus all of his newfound interest for speedrunning into the game. In late 2013, the popular speedrunning marathon Awesome Games Done Quick was planning its event for January 2014. With open submissions, the DKC community got together to submit as many runs for their games as they could. Morks took the opportunity to try and get DKC 3 into the event.
When I submitted the run to AGDQ, even AGDQ knew about the fact that DKC 3 wasn't as fun as the other ones. So it was really hard to convince them. And so what I did is that on the forums, I was talking to Mike Uyama, telling him how much the game means to me, that I think it would be really great to present as a trilogy, because the first one and the second one were already in, if I remember correctly. And so I was like, well, it could be fun to have like the whole trilogy one after the other. And he was like, well, people have told me that it's not as interesting, whatnot. And then I told him, well, tell you what, I'm gonna get a world record before GDQ, and he'll let me in. And he said, all right. And I mean, I think that I don't want to say that I used my charm, but basically, we spoke about it, and I think we had an agreement that it would be fun to put it in. So, and before, it was accepted for AGDQ, and I got a world record not so long afterwards in October. So, it just all came down together very cool,
With the promise to have the world record by the event, the GDQ community relinquished. Now it was up to Morks to make good. Starting in June of 2013, Morks had been racing the game on SRL every week and streaming PB attempts all the time. With this much practice, he kept himself sharp and continued to improve. Morks slowly brought his 50-58 PB down lower and lower to a 50-25, then a 50 flat on October 8th.
No! 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 Exactly, Jay! No! 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 No!
Morks is quickly approaching Kazunoko's 49-59 and Riz's 49-46. It's only 15 more seconds till he keeps his promise and secures the fastest time. Morks would accomplish his goal on October 22, 2013. Immediately after completing his run, Morks wound back the tape and reviewed the footage. Something we haven't talked about yet is version differences. Up to this point, most of the runners we've talked about ran on the Japanese version of the game, but Davis and Morks ran on English. At this point, runners hadn't fully tested the differences between each version, but there were a few things they noticed. The NTSC-U version, the version released in North America, had noticeably slower loading times when leaving levels. Compared to the NTSC-J version, the one released in Japan, there were more black frames during the transition. But the biggest difference was a strategy on the Mechanos boss fight, Chaos. During this fight, runners on the J version had to play the fight normally, waiting for Chaos to bring out the spinning blade so they could jump up and land on his head. However, runners on the U version noticed that on their copies of the game, they could perform a team throw after dealing damage to Chaos. Instead of falling down and waiting for the next cycle, they could continuously stay in the air and kill Chaos way faster. Theoretically, U runners could hit Chaos 6 times in one go, but it was very difficult to manage and usually didn't happen. This was the elusive one-cycle Chaos. Morks played well in the early game and attempted the one cycle. Unfortunately, he's only able to get 4 hits in, but it's still a major time save. Getting the last 2 hits on the next cycle, Morks still saves around 40 seconds over the J runners in this fight. Because of this time save, the versions are more balanced out, and Morks can still compete with the J community. After grinding and racing for months, Morks finally beat Riz's time by 1 second, a 49-45. With the record secured, Morks was ready for his run at AGDQ 2014. At the event, the trilogy of runs was a good show. For DKC1, Peachy and Karahime ran 101% and Glitched any% respectively. Reflected ran DKC2 any% right after, and last but not least was Morks with DKC3. Morks was the first ever marathon appearance for the game and played well. Wearing his banana hat and shades, Morks came in at 52:47, a respectable time for a marathon setting.
Wait for it. Wait for it. Time. Cool. All right. Ma tête. Oh, there you're cool.
Morks walked away that day with a sense of accomplishment. He had come into the community to push his favorite game, gotten the world record time, and performed on the largest stage. Every goal that he had set for himself, he had met. While he continued to join races from time to time, Morks was happy to put the game down and move on. He could rest easy knowing he had done great work. While there weren't a lot of runners to take his place, there was one person who kept playing. When Morks was racing on SRL, he was almost always running against another runner named Nocturne. Nocturne was another player who also preferred the third DKC game and was happy to work on strategies with Morks. Nocturne would usually look at the tasks of the game to see what strats he could incorporate into his gameplay. After Morks' retirement, he and Nocturne continued to race the game in their free time, but Nocturne was still looking to push his PB. During a practice session, Nocturne surprised himself with a 49.46, only a second behind Morks' world record.
That was close. That was really, really close. Oh man, that sucked.
But try as he might, Nocturne could never recapture the Lightning and take the record for himself. As time went on, new runners were making the jump from DKC2 to DKC3. Trilogy runs were on the rise, and more runners were branching out to race all 3 games in the series. Among these runners were Zelna, Void, Blunt Bunny, DGs, and more. And there to guide them on this journey was none other than Nocturne. As runners from the second game rolled in, they brought with them their game knowledge and expertise. Coming from a game where every fraction of a second is vital, the DKC2 runners were eager to continue pushing this game. Since it was historically less popular, there just weren't as many eyes on the game to squeeze out all of the time save. One of the runners leading this charge was Claude. Don't let his memey exterior fool you, Claude is very talented and dedicated speedrunner and strat finder.
Main thing I remember about Claude is he is a meme lord, but he is very good at everything he does. Everything he does, he just seems to always be great at it. Donkey 2, Donkey 3, SMRPG, always a good player at everything he does. I have a lot of respect for him. Yeah, he was one of those Donkey 2 players who once he came over, it's like, all right, I came close to getting the record, but I guess I'm not getting it anymore. As like those Donkey 2 players, they were just really, really, really good. And I knew they would pick up the game in no time. It didn't really make me hesitate in, offering any word or showing any strat if it could help them. But once they pivoted over, I knew it wasn't going to happen for me.
Claude dabbled in DKC3 back in 2014, but he spent most of that year fighting tooth and nail for dominance in DKC2. With the discovery of new wrong warps and the heated console debate, the competition for DKC2 was fierce. After a long battle with Reflected, both parties moved on from the game. Looking for a new target to fixate on, Claude turned his focus to this run. One of Claude's specialties is finding strats and shortcuts in levels. It wasn't long before he found a 2-1 jump on the level 6-5 Ropey Rumpus. A 2-1 jump is a double frame perfect jump where Kitty can throw Dixie into the air while not standing on the ground. This adds a little extra height to the throw, allowing runners to reach ledges normally too high up. While not useful in most places, there are a few locations where a jump like this can skip to parts further in the level. On this level, it's possible to hit a barrel and save 10 seconds. Claude had gotten his PB to a high 49-minute time over the course of the year. Now in August, this 10-second time save put his 49.48 a lot closer to the record. Equipped with his big time saver, you'd expect that this was Claude's ace up his sleeve. In a funny turn of events, however, Claude screwed up the trick 8 times and barely broke even. He then proceeded to finish the run and still beat the world record. Claude didn't even need the new 2-1 jump to take the lead.
We did it, boys!
Hey! Done.
After this run, Claude took a short break from DKC3. While there were races going on in the background, most runners weren't too serious about pushing their PBs and going for the fastest times. Luckily, Claude wasn't gone for too long. In February, he came back to do the run justice. Nailing the 2-1 jump on 6.5, he takes home a 49.11 on February 22, 2016. Something to note, Claude had gone back to playing on the J version of the game. By this point, there still wasn't a clear consensus on which version was really faster. Between J's faster loads and U's faster chaos fight, the jury was out on which one was really the best for speedrunning. However, someone was going to put an end to that. Longtime DKC2 runner DGs made his way over to DKC3 and took it upon himself to do some science. Let's take a look at the differences he found. The Japanese version's main advantage over the North American version was its faster loading times. More specifically, every time players leave a stage, they have about 17 fewer frames of black screen transition when playing on J. In a 60 FPS game, that's just over a quarter of a second. The J version also saves almost half a second every time players enter Funky's Garage. In loading times alone, the J version saves about 19.4 seconds over U. There are bits and pieces of each version where one saves a few frames over the other, but the biggest difference between versions was of course the Mechanos boss fight, Chaos. If you remember, on the U version, runners found that there was an exploit that allowed players to do a team throw in the air after landing on Chaos's head, giving them a chance to hit the boss again and again. Optimally, players could keep the hits going in one try, but actually getting this was near impossible. However, being blessed with the 2-cycle fight would leave U players about 26 seconds ahead of an optimal fight on the J version. All told, a U version run with the loading differences and the faster Chaos fight should theoretically be about 5 or 6 seconds faster than the J version. DGs had put in the legwork to time out every stretch of the run and put an end to the rumors. At the time, DGs was running on emulator instead of on console, and had the tools to easily time things readily available. After sharing his findings, DGs started doing runs on the U version. In only 2 months, DGs had caught up to Claude's times. With his skills from running DKC2, he adapted pretty quickly. Using the faster Chaos strat, he was ready to challenge Claude head on.
I remember that morning there was I was supposed to go out of town and there was a big snowstorm and I couldn't leave because of the snowstorm. So I'm like, I'll just do some runs, I guess. I didn't even have a timer. I wasn't even streaming. And I did the run and I knew it was world record even without a timer. I was like, wow, that was a solid run. I bet this was world record. And I timed it and I'm like, wow, it was by almost 10 seconds. And it was really surprising for me because I was still pretty fresh with this game. I was only 2 or 3 months in. So I was really happy about it. But then the snowstorm calmed down and I went to my trip out of town. And it was a 5-hour road trip. And when I didn't have internet, obviously, in the car. And when I reached my destination, I look at the internet and it's like, oh my God, Claude already fucking beat me. He already beat me. You only beat me by, I think, half a second. But it didn't even stand for 1 day. He couldn't let me have it for just more than 1 day. It was pretty fun. Freaking the Claude.
With the quick switch to the U version, Claude was able to beat out DGs, if only by 0.5 seconds. Looking for a more definitive victory, Claude kept pushing. Only a few days later, he pulled out a 48.59 on March 29th, the first sub 49.
Nice run. That's gold too, wow. A rolled 8 is, a rolled 7 rather, is really bad.
DGs knew that he could take on Claude, so after a few weeks, he got back on the grind. In order to stay in a good headspace, DGs was streaming runs without a timer, and retiming them afterwards. On April 3rd, he started up a run on a pretty good pace. In the retiming, he's 7 seconds ahead coming out of World 5. For the viewers watching, it was a gripping experience. That is, until the stream cuts out during the level 6-2. DGs lost internet connection at a crucial point, but lucky for him, he was recording his run locally. Or so he thought. DGs was unaware of a particular setting that he had enabled which ends the local recording if the stream stops. Because he couldn't reconnect, DGs ended the broadcast and the local recording died as well. Noticing this too late, he starts a new recording heading into level 6-5. With the first try on the 2-1 jump, he's keeping pace and playing hot. He finishes the run with a major world record. The problem was, DGs refused to accept it. Because the footage cut out mid-run and only came back on a first try 6-5, DGs felt like people would assume it was spliced. DGs was mad at himself for not using a timer, because now he had nothing to verify. Even though runners like Claude believed DGs, DGs himself wasn't satisfied. There was only one thing to do: beat it again. He wouldn't need long. April 6th, 3 days later. DGs is off to a good start. The first 2 worlds are simple and finished in 5 minutes and 25 seconds. Mechanos falls as well, and DGs is right on pace with the 48-48 from a few days prior. On Worlds 4 and 5, DGs cleans up his movement from last time and squeezes out a few more seconds. Coming out of the bleak boss fight, he's a full 5 seconds ahead of the 48-48. DGs kept his momentum going into World 6, and even got the first try 2-1 jump on Ropey Rumpus again. On the home stretch, he doesn't let up. He takes down K. Rool and finishes the run in 48-38, world record by 10 seconds.
I can get off the ride. I can fucking get off the ride, Claude. I can do it. You know what? I'm just happy that I got... Like, I don't even care if it's a 3x or a 4x. I'm just happy that I got this run fast after the bullshit from the other day. So that I don't have to fucking grind like ass for bullshit time.
After the trouble with his last run, DGs could finally breathe easy. There were no recording issues on this run, and he knocked it out of the park. The community could see that this run was something special.
I've done a lot of speed runs, but like that 48-38 always gonna have like a special place for me because it was at the time. Nowadays anyone can beat it because there's so much new strats. You can easily beat that because there's so many small little things. But at the time, it was a really good run.
While people joked about the game being bad, the reality of the situation was a lot of players just didn't like grinding this game. With his landmark run, DGs was ready to hang it up. He really wanted to retire after his 48-48, but with the recording issues, he didn't feel right. But now felt like a good time to bow out. Claude could see that DGs had really worked his ass off for this one, and beating it was a very tall order. But as he is wont to do, Claude decided to work smarter, not harder. What could Claude do to improve the fastest time? DGs had gotten a 2-cycle fight on Chaos, but what if there was a way to consistently get 1 cycle? Claude went to work.
I don't want to say he wants to put the least amount of effort into his speedruns because obviously he puts a lot of effort, but when it comes to grinding runs, he's definitely going to try and minimize the amount of resets and grinding he has to do. You could argue that DKC 300% is the game that he's grinded the most outside of maybe Final Fantasy Tactics, but even then he didn't want to just grind for like trying to beat my time. He just was like, well, I'm just gonna find something that saves a lot of time and I'll just do that and I'll get the world record back.
A week later, lo and behold, he had found it. By playing around in the chaos fight for a while and trying different places, Claude found an easy and consistent way to kill the boss as fast as possible. Done optimally, this setup saved 10 seconds over the 2-cycle fight. With this at his disposal, Claude made short work of DG's run. For the rest of April, Claude worked to improve the record to a 48.26 on May 2nd. This run was on par with DG's run, but also included the 1-cycle chaos. With this run, Claude took a break. Status report. So where are we in this story? After years of neglect and being overshadowed, DKC3 has gotten some real attention. With both Claude and DG's pushing the fastest times, the game is getting the treatment it deserves. Claude is also finding new ways to improve the route, like a consistent manipulation for Lightning Lookout, one of the hardest levels in the game. People are finally taking the game seriously. Part of taking the game seriously is looking at harder strategies and ideas and trying to implement them into the run. One of Claude's specialties as a runner is an eye for optimization. Taking a critical look at levels, he often found small ways to improve a number of stages. Claude would watch tool-assisted speedruns and figure out how it was saving time over the RTA route. He excelled at adapting task strats into something runners could manage. Claude had been studying the most recent Japanese task of the game, a 4240 by and noticed a trick that skipped the 5th boss in the game, Bleak. In the task, intentionally takes damage and dies as soon as possible during the fight. After getting hit the second time, the task pauses on the last possible frame before the fade out. Surprisingly, the game considers the fight to be over and accepts that the stage is completed, skipping the fight entirely. This was huge. This was Bleak Skip. Claude went back to the lab to test this trick out. Because of the language barrier, none of the runners outside of Japan even knew this trick existed. Claude brought this skip to the rest of the community, but there was a problem. This was a frame-perfect pause in a 60 FPS game. There was also no visual cue. Runners just had to know the timing and maybe pay attention to the music. It was also exclusive to the Japanese version of the game, which meant runners had to give up on the fast and easy chaos fight. Claude was one of the few people crazy enough to give it a shot. The other runners did not share his optimism.
I was like, wow, I'm glad I quit the game because I don't like these types of tricks. It's like, well, you gotta press start on the perfect frame and you save a minute. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. And I was like, wow, I made the best decision of my life to stop playing this game.
But as for my thoughts on it, I hate it. It's one of those ironic things where it's like, for a while, everyone was hoping for a big skip for Donkey Kong Country 3, like for Donkey 1 and Donkey 2. And then when we finally got it, it's just like, oh crap, just go back. I don't want it anymore. Like, the big issue primarily is just the way the SNES pause button is. It's not like a Joy-Cons or a Wiimotes where it's just like a click button. It's like a squishy button. So finding out exactly how much pressure you need to put in to get the pause at the right moment is a little awkward. So it's just one of those things that you really have to grind on your own to get a feel for and then just pray.
Oh, that sucks, dude. I mean, it's so I had the game in Japanese for the Virtual Console, so I could do that category if I wanted to. But the Bleak Skip seemed to me like, back then at least, like a cheap way to gain time. I'm not sure exactly how to say it. Like, it's part of the game. It's part of all of it. But like reaching World 5 and having to do that trick and nail it, I don't know. I didn't see the point. That was the break for me where I told myself, well, I don't think I want to inflict that to myself. So I'm gonna step off.
Bleak Skip was the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of runners. Most people weren't in love with this game, and with the addition of this skip, there was no reason to keep going. Claude was one of the few people left to push the game further. The promise of massive time save was immediately enticing, but the reality was not so glamorous. While Claude initially started saving time, his runs were dying to bleak skip on a regular basis. He was able to get runs like a 48-23 and a 48-12, but the grind was only getting more ridiculous. On a good pace out of World 5, Claude plays the last 2 worlds safely and comes in with a 48-02, just barely missing the minute barrier. However, try as he might, Claude could not beat this time. Even with an insane pace out of Chaos, one missed frame on Bleak threw it all away. Claude was ready to throw in the towel. DGs had already retired even before Bleak Skip was found, and Claude was getting tired of resetting on World 5. For all the work and effort they had put into making the run faster, the toll to keep going was just too much for them. Losing steam just before the sub 48, Claude was ready to move on. Now that almost everyone who cared about the game had left, who would carry the torch? One more runner was waiting in the wings to take over. A newer runner from Japan named Sui Mind. Sui was gaining momentum. While Claude was slowing down and coming to a stop, Sui blazed right past him. Just a month after Claude's 48-02, Sui swooped in. He passed into the limelight with a 48 flat on August 31st, followed by a 47-55 on September 3rd. Sui was getting these times with better movement. Compared to Claude, Sui saves a few seconds here and there up to World 5. He even loses all that time in World 6, but cleans up with a faster World 7. Some runners might be happy to rest on their laurels, especially once they finally reach the summit. But Sui wasn't stopping anytime soon. Sui knew that his late game could be a lot faster. After all, he lost all of his time save in 6-4 and just barely beat out Claude in his last PB. If he could play a little riskier and get better luck on creepy caverns, he could solidify his lead. After a short break and some practice, Sui would do just that. With a run on par with his last time, but with a solid late game, Sui came in hot with a 47-30, a massive improvement to the world record. With this run, DKC3 was pushing up to the limit of human potential. While the fastest task of the game was a 42-40, there were just some things that weren't reasonable for a person to do. The task makes climbing ropes look fast, but the inputs are way too tight to do consistently. The task even does this crazy strat on the Chaos fight where it uses 4 double frame perfect jumps to skip waiting for cycles. No one could do that. Right? Remember 2-1 jumps? With the B press, then an A press 2 frames later, then another B press 17 frames later, Kitty can get extra height on his team throw. Since the J version can't do team throws after hitting Chaos, they've been playing the fight the slow way. But in the task, precise team throws made it possible to hit Chaos sooner. If runners could hit each one, they'd save massive time over the normal way. Sui was determined to keep going, even if it meant going for this task Chaos strat. Hitting the 2-1 jumps was hard enough once, but he knew he could go for it 4 times. Missing the throw was dangerous too, as misplacing Dixie could lead to her taking damage and losing a Kong, putting an end to the team throws. Sui was ready to take it up a notch.
Sui back in the day, he really jumped very far ahead of everyone else because he did a trick that no one else dared do at the time called Task Chaos. Chaos is the boss of the 4th world of the game, Mechanos. But Sui, he decided to task Chaos, which involves doing several 2-1 jumps to do the fight much faster. It was not deemed to be RTA viable until Sui started doing it, and now most of the Japanese runners are maining that.
For the next year, Sui threw himself at the run. The kid gloves were coming off. Before the 47-30, Sui could afford to lose a few seconds here and there to little mistakes, but that time was over. Each run demanded cleaner gameplay and more precision. If he was going to keep pushing the game, he needed to play very well on top of hitting the crazy tricks like Task Chaos and Bleak Skip. Sui kicked things off in May with a 47-24 on May 30th, followed by a 47-12 just a few days later. With the help of Task Chaos, Sui had a huge time save in the run, but he still had to play really well everywhere else. Even with a clean Chaos fight, his 4712 lost a lot of time in World 6. Over the next month, Sui was inching ever closer to the minute mark. On July 20th, Sui gets back-to-back PBs. First, a 4706, and later that day, a 4703. It wouldn't be long before he got it. 2 weeks later, on August 3rd, Sui got a 4654.
GG 長かったよマジ長かったよ47分9まで長かったよ遠かったやったよ46
Sui was the first one to really do that in runs. Task Chaos gave him a huge advantage at the cost of potentially resetting runs, resetting a lot of runs early on. But the thing is Sui was just ridiculously consistent at 2-1 jumps. And that's part of the reason why he was able to main that strategy with great success.
For the last few months, the PBs were coming along nicely. Working out the kinks with the Task Chaos strat, getting other tricks first try, like the water bounce on 6-4 or the 2-1 jump on 6-5, Sui is squeezing out all the time the game has left. But Sui was determined to get a run that had everything. As a testament to the challenge, Sui grinded for over a month without a PB. Everything had to come together. Finally, on September 23rd, Sui was on a good pace. He was only a second or two behind his best segments going into the Chaos fight. Sui manages to get a perfect Chaos fight, hitting every one of the jumps to get an early kill. This is it. Carrying the time save into World 5, things are looking good. That is, until 5-3 when a slip off the cliff eats 6 seconds. Still, recomposing himself, Sui keeps moving. At the end, he comes in with a 46-45. Sui couldn't go out like this. He had planned to go out with a bang, but with some glaring flaws in the run, like the 5-3 mistake, he just couldn't bring himself to stop now. It wouldn't be easy. It had taken him a month of attempts just to get the last run. It would likely take just as long to get it again. By now, Sui had been grinding the game for over a year. He took his first title back in August of 2016. With his 46-45 from September, he had been running consistently for 13 months. He was ready to put an end to this. After another month of grinding, he got his chance. October 19th. Sui starts another run. The first 2 worlds had become so commonplace, so routine. After 2,400 attempts, these first 5 minutes have been etched into his mind. His World 2 split could be better, but a 5-12 is respectable. He's off to Mechanos. Rolling through these factories, Sui is cutting corners and dodging enemies with ease. He's at the boss fight in no time. With a careful setup, Sui gets the 4 team throws and gets Chaos in the perfect position. On the 5th hit, Sui hovers just over the boss's head and waits for the blades to come out. By waiting for the blade platforms, Sui is able to land a hit and then land on the platform and go for another hit right after. This trick is so precise, it's usually reserved for the machine-like precision of a task. But that doesn't deter this runner. World 4 and 5 go smoothly as well, even getting a gold split on Cotton Top Cove. He cleans up his World 5 from last time. Sui cruises through K3 and lands Bleak Skip to boot. He's entering into the gauntlet. World 6 and 7 have some of the hardest levels in the game. Levels like Pothole Panic, Conveyor Rope Crash, and Creepy Caverns are chaotic and very easy to bleed time if you're not careful. But going into the last world, Chaos Core, Sui is almost 20 seconds ahead of his PB. He holds on to the lead. He takes down the final boss, 4630. Sui had spent the last 14 months just slaving over this category. When everyone else gave up on this game, Sui just pushed through it. He didn't quit just because the tricks got hard. He even went so far as to go for a strat most people didn't even believe was humanly possible. After destroying the record, Sui was ready to move on to something else. Sui left his mark on the any percent category. With the use of Task Chaos, any challenger would essentially be forced to use the strat as well. Months passed, and no one was anywhere close to beating Sui's time. 2018 came and went. 2019 too. Over 2 years had gone by and still, no one could touch his 4630. Sui's time became a line in the sand, waiting for someone to cross it. The story almost ended here. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the category almost died outright after Sui's 4630. Not only was there a nasty frame-perfect trick right in the middle of the run with Bleak Skip, in order to even get that far, you'd have to pull off task-level precision on the Chaos boss fight too. The task was Herculean, and no one was looking to put themselves through hell to take it down.
It was just a super daunting time to beat. It was 51 seconds ahead of number 2 on the leaderboards at the time, and even further ahead of any non-Japanese runners. So we just felt like this was a time that we could not reasonably achieve, and several people had gotten 46 since that time, but it was just such a daunting task to try and beat it.
One aspect that doesn't get mentioned too often in these stories is the mental barrier, the struggle that exists in each runner's own head. It's a feeling that most people in any competitive endeavor can understand. Sui's 4630 was so far ahead of everyone else's that it felt pointless to even try to beat it. For the competition, the run was unassailable. So what was a runner to do? Suppose for a moment that someone did want to beat Sui's time. What could they do to cross the barrier? Well, in the last 2 years, people had been shaving time off of most stages, slowly but surely grinding away time across each world. There was even a new 4-second time save on level 2-1 with the zip up the tree. With perfect movement and new tricks, runners wouldn't need a perfect chaos fight. One runner saw this opportunity and went for it. Meet Leftover. We've actually talked about them before, under a different name. The author of the Japanese TAS of 4240 is also a talented runner. They were looking to push the game through this 2-year drought. To save himself some trouble, he started looking for a new strat for the chaos fight, one that didn't include 4 double frame perfect jumps. Their strat used a very simple but very precise technique to achieve this. Both Kongs have a team throw ability, but each character doing the throw has unique properties. Kitty throws Dixie up in the air to gain height, or forward to hit enemies. Dixie, on the other hand, throws Kitty forwards, causing him to roll like a bowling ball. While he's rolling, Dixie can actually jump on top of him like a rolling barrel, and jump again, using Kitty like a moving platform. This little extra height was just enough to get on top of the boss when it was at its lowest altitude. This strat was not quite as fast as Task Chaos, but it only lost a few seconds and was notably more consistent. But with time saves from other stages, it was a net improvement. Got to work. Sui's time had stood for so long for good reason. It was very well done and required a lot of time and effort. They were prepared to work for this. They were streaming consistently while he grinded. He even has a layout to show where he's lost runs today. But this run's going to be different. Everything starts smoothly. The runner gets best segments on the first 2 worlds. Compared to the record, he's entering the Chaos fight 2 seconds ahead. Using the team throws, they quickly knock out the first 3 cycles using the rolling method. After the 5th hit, he does a damage boost to quickly finish him off. This strat loses him about 7 seconds, but he's fine with that. This run can go the distance. With tighter movement, they were closing the gap. After hitting Bleak Skip, they're actually ahead of Sui by 2 seconds. Without letting off the gas, they blaze through World 7 11 seconds faster. The drought was over. Takes home a 46-21.
It's just crazy consistent. There was one notable mistake in 6-1, but other than that, the run was extremely clean. And he also started implementing a new route through the later half of World 6 and 7, which comes down to Kong management, and it makes Creepy Caverns and Lightning Lookout in World 7 a lot harder, but it does save a few seconds overall. So that's the big routing difference, and other than that, it was just optimization, not making mistakes. It was a very impressive run for sure.
Proved that with updated movement and a lot of dedication, it was possible to break through Sui's barrier. Has since moved on, but his run was a landmark success. The effects were not immediate, but taking down Sui's time opened the field for other runners to rise up. It wouldn't be until 11 months later that we start to see other runners approach the 4630 line. Among these runners were Blue Pen 49 and Weiss Schaff, 2 runners from Japan. Blue Pen 49 had actually gotten pretty close to the record in 2019, but put the game down after getting a 46-35. But as 2021 came around, both Blue and Schaff went on the offensive. Instead of going for Chaos strat, these two went all in on the 2-1 jumps. Together, the two of them would both get 46-26 PBs on the same day. Both players had issues in their runs that held them back from taking the record. For Blue, he missed 2 of the 2-1 jumps on Chaos, while Schaff choked his run in the last 2 worlds. Both players were capable of great things though. Who would be the first to beat? Only a week after the double PB, it was Blue who would clutch it out. With a cleaner Chaos fight, Blue was able to reclaim the time he lost in his last run, and held on to it till the end. Without any unforced errors, how much time did this run save? Blue managed a new time of 46.07, a whopping 19 seconds faster. While it's pretty impressive, it still wasn't perfect, but it was pretty close. Using riskier strats in the last 2 worlds like there was still a few more seconds left to squeeze out. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. As appealing as another run through the unrelenting gauntlet sounds, Blue decided to put the game down for a while. The enemy of perfection is complacency. He wasn't alone. Schaff would also take a break, and like so many other points across this game's history, progress would have to wait. Schaff would return, and it was time for him to make his sophomore leap. For Schaff, the largest area of improvement would be continuing to play well down the stretch. It doesn't matter if you throw a 110-mile fastball if you can't make the throw to first. Rounding out the rough edges of his game was the only way forward. In early December, Schaff was playing like a man possessed, with Worlds 6 and 7 executed wonderfully. This would prove to be enough to get a 46.06. Since that tied PB with Blue back in January, their paths were intertwined. It would only be a matter of time before they crossed paths again. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house, only one creature was stirring, Blue Pen's mouse. The splits were laid by the run with care, with hopes that King K. Rool would soon be there. The runners were nestled all snug in the chat, while visions of PBs danced in their heads. 'Twas a Christmas miracle, Blue sprang with delight. He received a 46.01 on Christmas Eve night. But there was a problem, one not found on first glance. Late into his run, Blue's internet dropped by chance. With no local recording, this run seemed moot, but it was still a PB, an impressive one to boot. No one would accuse Blue of splicing, as he was clearly a talented player and was on a great pace heading into the last level. The community accepted this run, but they were put in an awkward place. The world record run was incomplete. Like with DGs before, it just didn't feel right to leave it like this. Not to mention, being only 2 seconds from the next minute barrier, there was a lot of pressure to get one last run. But it wasn't Blue who gave the people what they wanted. Shaft came back on February 1st for the save. Shaft put his heart into this one. He lost a bit of time during the Chaos fight, but then turned up the heat. Sriracha! He saves 2 seconds on the next world, then another 4 on the next. By the end of World 6, he's back in the lead. Saving 4 more seconds on World 7, Shaft closes out a 45:59, the first ever 45-minute time. This was it. The run that checked every box. The run that crossed the final minute barrier. The run that can be shown with irrefutable proof it was done in one sitting. The undisputed world record run, executed by one of the best runners in recent history. With no doubt in anyone's mind what the best run of DKC3 could look like, this is where our original story ended. So where has the story gone from here? Since Shaft's 45:59, there have been new world records. A 45:49 by Wazamajin, and a 45:46 by Jet Pastel. Jet Pastel is the current world record holder, and if you want to see just how much faster 13 seconds is in practice, we highly recommend you check out his run. Across all the videos we have made for this channel, there is one constant that runs through all of them. Our videos are what runners grow beyond. They are born to become obsolete, and that's exciting. There is so much history that hasn't been written yet. Donkey Kong Country 3 has come a long way. This game may never grow out of its older brother's shadow, but it has made a name for itself. It is a unique and rewarding experience because it's different. There are many people who choose to run DKC3 because its lack of tricks make it more accessible. In the 20-odd years of its history, it went from people asking if there was any interest to having runners wage war to take the crown. My, how you've grown. This is where we say goodbye. The Donkey Kong Country community has been very kind in our pursuits to document their stories. We cut our teeth on making videos with them. It was a learning experience for all of us. The friends we've made along the way have made it all worthwhile. And thank you to everyone who watched these videos. This is the end of the Donkey Kong Country videos, for good. Hey, thanks for watching our video. If you want to join the community, check out our Discord. Also, consider supporting us on Patreon. It really helps. Thanks.